Okay, thanks guys. Happy learning.
Thanks, Chetan. Yeah, hi everyone. This is Kirti. So I'll be going through this session for today. I hope everyone can hear me and everyone can see my screen on WebEx.
Just Kirti.
Yeah, thanks. So today is the second day of our learning. I think we went through a lot of theoretical aspects yesterday. I think Sapna went through all the basic concepts and the architecture for 6.x. Do you guys have any questions for this? I think if we can go through that first, then we can start with the next exercise. If you guys have any questions with the exercise first or with the concepts what Sapna went through yesterday. Okay, then I think we are good to start. So these are the topics what we'll be covering today, like the JMS palettes, the JDBC palettes. So the basic thing first, I'll start with the project creation, and we'll have an exercise where we'll cover JMS palettes, JDBC palettes, and properties and the subprocesses. So I won't go through in detail for JMS and JDBC because moreover it's similar to what we have in 5.x. So I will tell what is the differentiate factor what we have in 6.x apart from 5.x, and just a brief through of it, and I will show a project where we are using JMS and the JDBC palettes. Guys, please let me know if I'm going fast, and you can just and ask me to slow down. Yeah, so I think as all of us know that JMS is a Java message service. So it's a specification where we send the message, get the message in a Java environment. So we have multiple applications, and when one of the application sends a message and we have another application which needs a message, and that is done through JMS. So the models what are basically supported in JMS are point to point, which is queue, and publish subscribe, which is topics. So if we want to send the message to a single recipient, then we'll push it to a queue, and if we want multiple recipients to get the message, then the publisher has to send the message to the topic. And we have various JMS palettes. I think the number of palettes will differentiate between what we had in 5.x and what we have in 6.x. So I will tell you what difference we have. I think the get JMS queue message palette, it's a similar to what we have in 5.x, which is to get a message or retrieve a message from the queue. Next, we have a JMS receive message palette. So this was not there in 5.x. In 5.x, we had two separate receivers, one for queue, which was JMS queue receiver, and for topic, JMS topic subscriber. But here we have a single palette, which is JMS receive message, and in that we need to configure whether our destination is queue or topic, and there is an additional feature called generic. So we will use the single this palette for both as a queue receiver and as a topic subscriber, and generic we use it when we don't know whether the destination is a queue or topic. So it will create an abstract object and just push the message, and based on the destination the message will be picked. We haven't tried the generic thing because in our project we are using 6.2.2, not even 6.3.2. So in 6.2.2 it was not being supported. We need to check if it's supported in 6.3.2 or not. So the other palettes what we have is JMS request reply. I think this is again a common which is used for both the queues and topics. A JMS send message. So this is again replacing two palettes in 5.x where we had a JMS queue sender and a JMS topic publisher. Now we have only JMS send message, and we have reply to JMS message. I think this we normally use when we have a receiver. Once we get the message and if we want to reply, then we use reply to JMS message, and wait for JMS request. So wait for JMS request is again applicable for both queues and topics, and it's like based on a message. So we will wait until a message is sent to a queue or it is published to the topic, and we'll be waiting for the message, listening to that queue or topic. I think this is like similar. Most of the things are similar to what we had it in 5.x. Just the number of pallets have been decreased, but all the functionalities or all what we had it in 5.x is still being covered in 6.x with less number of pallets. So I'll move to JDBC. I think once I go to the once I am done with JDBC, before going to properties, I'll just show you in studio how do we configure JMS and how do we configure JDBC palettes. Then we can move to the properties. So JDBC palettes, as I think this is moreover completely similar to what we have in 5.x. Like we have these 4 palettes: JDBC call procedure, JDBC query, JDBC update, and SQL direct. JDBC call procedure, as we know, it's like it calls a procedure or a function in the database. JDBC query is for a simple select statement. JDBC update is if you need to insert or update any record into the database. And SQL direct, we use it when we need to create dynamically queries and for DDL operations. So these are the 4 activities what are available for JDBC, for palettes, and it's similar to what we have in 5.x. So now I will just go through a project where we used both JMS and JDBC. So we have created a project, and I think as Sapna went through yesterday, for each whatever, like when we say project, we used what the terminology what we used to use in 5.x. Here we have a module and an application. So an application can have one module and multiple shared modules. So and our code actually runs from the application. So whatever you configure in the module will get reflected in the application once you configure that. So I'll just show how do we create a module and an application. So under File, New, I think these detailed steps you will find it in the lab book also what I have shared, and you can go through that also. I won't create a new project here. I will just show you the steps what we used to configure this. So we'll select the BusinessWorks, and I will select the BusinessWorks application module. So when I click on next, it asks me the project name. So this project name will be, say I give Tibco training _2. So this will be the name of our module, and this will be the name of our application. So a dot application is appended, and this is our application. And it asks for us, do we need to create an empty process with the project or not? If we uncheck this, then we'll have the module and the application created without the process. But normally we do need at least one process to run our application or to perform the task for which we are building the service. So we need to have this selected and just click on next. I think this is the default project structure what we have. I think Sapna went through this yesterday, like what all we have: a process package, we have policies, resources, schemas, and service descriptors. And once we are done, we just need to click on finish. So we'll see a structure like this, where we have a process package. Under process, we have, if you see, there are 3 packages. I think we don't need to go through the next 2. I think we will go through them in the coming sessions. We have service descriptors. We have resources where we configure our shared connections. We have schemas and policies. We aren't using any policies, so we haven't configured anything here. And when I show that we create an empty process, by default an empty process is created like this. And these activities won't be there. I have added it. Let me show you how an empty process looks like, and I will delete that. So if you see, whenever we are creating a process, it asks us as a modifier whether we want public or private. This is similar to public and private concept in Java. If I make it as public, then I can use it across different process packages. If I make it as private, then I can use it only in that specific package. So normally we do use public because we want to use this across different process packages and different modules. And if I click on finish, so this is how an empty process will look like. So I just want to show one difference. So this, I think you can see it in yellowish orange color. If you see this, that means by default it is created as a starter process, and this will be added to the components. And if you, for a sub process, because from the project explorer point of view, all looks like same, like message receiver, message sender, sub process. So how do we differentiate whether it's the process starter or it's a sub process? So if you see, if it's in orangish or yellowish color, then it's a process starter. When I click on the sub process, it's in green color. So that means it's a sub process without service. Here we have concept of with service and a normal sub process. This is a normal sub process. And the message center, this is again one more process starter. I will show you how a service sub process also looks like. We don't have this as part of this exercise, but I will just create and show it to you. Any questions still now?
No kids.
Yeah, thanks. So I will delete this test process. We don't need this. Okay, and I will just go through how do we create a JMS connection and a JDBC connection, and then we'll just go through. I'll show you all the JMS and the JDBC palettes here. So under resources, there is we create a package, and under that package we can configure the shared connection what we want to. Like in our case, first we want to create a JMS connection. Then I'll just create a JMS connection, and here you have two options. As I told you, if we don't know what is our destination type, we need to select generic as our messaging style. But if we know whether we are using either queue or topic, then we need to use queue or topic. And the rest of the configuration are similar to what we have in Fire.x. We need to configure a queue connection factory, a topic connection factory, and if it's not direct, if it's direct, you don't need JNDI configuration. And if you want to, like if when you are moreover, if you're testing it locally, you can create it as direct. But if in practical, in real-time scenario, we do create a JNDI configuration. So for that, we need to create a JNDI configuration, and that also we need to again right-click on the resource package, new, and you can see a JNDI configuration here. So here you need to provide the naming provided URL you have to provide with the host details, and this is the context factor which is by default. So for our testing purpose, as part of this exercise, we have created a direct connection type with queue or topic. But in practically, whenever we use it in the project, we will have a JNDI configuration, and this will be the connection factory type will be JNDI. I'll just delete the ones what I've added now. Similarly, we create the other resources, like if I need to create a JDBC connection, we need to click on JDBC, give a proper resource name, and click on finish. So here also, I think these are the standard fields what we have in Fire.x also. And the one thing additional, I think if you guys have used JDBC palettes earlier, we need to configure that OJDBC jar if it's an Oracle driver. And we place it in JDBC TPCL folder. Here we have an option. If you see, we have an option to click here to set preferences. And this is the path where we can place our jar file, which will provide us a runtime, the design time configuration. Like if once we place the OJDBC file in this path, and if once we do the test connection, it will be successful. So this is just a dummy one. So, and if you don't provide, then it will throw an error saying that you need to add that jar file. But that's only for the design time. In the runtime, you need to install the driver using the BW. Okay, so you see we have one more. This is a data format, and this is similar to what we had in Pyrotex. We are using a comma separator column, and we have these fields as part of it. Okay, so I'll show you what all JDBC and JMS palettes we have. See, as I went through those details, we have a get JMS queue message, a JMS receive message, request reply, JMS send message, reply to JMS message, and wait for JMS reply. And then functionality wise, I think it's more or less similar. The differentiate factor is we have less number of palettes, but we are getting all the functionalities what we had in 5.x, and we have one more connection type called generic if we are not sure whether the destination is either queue or topic. And for JDBC, so these are the 4 palettes and similar to what we had in 5.x. So we have 3 processes created. I'll first go through the first process. What are we doing here? As you can see, the first activity in this process is a timer activity, and then a read file activity because we have the file content. I'll just show you the file also. So this is the file. I just have one record with an employee ID, employee name, and the location. So I'll just go through quickly the lab exercise. I think what is required out of it. So let me just go through quickly the problem definition and how are we providing a solution using a 6.x application. So the problem definition is we have multiple offices, as we all know, and we have a single database where all our details are being stored. So it's a very simple problem definition. And what we are doing here is from all the offices, we'll get a message to the queue, which our timer activity is doing, like just sending the message to the queue. And then we'll read the message from the queue, which we are doing it from the next process where we have a queue receiver. A JMS receiver, which will be applicable for both queue and topic. Then we transform it into the format in which we need to insert it into database. Then we actually insert this into the database, which will in turn be part of, like you can see we are using MySQL database. So this is the queue what we are using, and this is the XSD, which I can show it over here, employee schema XSD, which has just 3 fields: an employee ID, employee name, and employee branch. And this is the database table script. So I think we have sent the prerequisites also. So if you want, you need to install all those things on MySQL database, Tibco 6.x. Then you can use this script to create the table what we have, or you can create your own table. And we have in detail the deployment steps, what I went through. So I think this is the basic step. I think I had my project already open, but I'll show you this also here. So we need to click on Studio for designers, and we need to provide an appropriate path for our workspace. And once you click on OK, we'll find an empty workspace, and then is the next step what I showed you guys is to how to create an application, BusinessWorks application model. So you can go through each step we have in detail in the lab book, see how it looks like when we create an empty workspace, then we create an application module. And you let me know if you have any questions when you go through lab book also. I can help you guys with that. So I'll just go through the JMS things, what we have configured. Like as I went through, we have this JMS sender. So you can either, I'll show you how do we add an activity. You can either right click here, add activity. So we have different types, basic activities, general activities, and say we have JMS activities. Or else you can just drag it from here. And we just need to click on the activity. And if you do this, we'll have a transition. It's an already transition, so it's not being done. Like I'll delete this transition and redo it. And and you can directly add an activity from this transition. So it will have a direct transition and it will add an activity. So you can select any of the activity. Let me just select a dummy activity. Say I select read write file. This is to add the transition. If you see it, to create a transition between activities, and this will create a new activity from this activity. So there will be automatically transition. These all are similar what we had at Fire.x, success with condition, conditions in the transition, success with condition, success with no matching condition, and error. We have a JMS send message activity, and at the end we have log activity. Here we are just logging that once we publish the message to the queue, we are logging saying that message published with the message ID. Then once we publish this message, we have a message receiver. So this process, as a JMS receives message as the starter activity, will get the message, and I went through the data format. We will use that data format and we'll pass the data. So our data will look like, our response will be like employee data, and we'll have these three fields instead. And here we are calling a sub process. I'll go through the rest of the part once I am done with the rest of the things in PPT. I'll show you how do we create a sub process, how do we call a sub process, and I'll show you both the ways how do we do using a service and a direct sub process call. Do you guys have any questions?
Hello? No, Kit. Yeah, I have one question here.
Yeah.
This 6.x, there is no end palette for the process?
No, we don't need it. Like if you see a sub process that do have an end activity similar to Fire.x, but whenever you have defined it as the main process, you don't need to end it. So if you see, but after this will be automatically ended.
Okay, but in case of the 5.x, we have the main and the sub also we have the end, right? So here this end is replaced, right? It is not. It is replaced with the last final palette, right? From the main palette, main process.
Yeah. So I got your question, and I understand, but we don't have an end palette here. This is a starter process which is not waiting for anything. Like if we have a service, you will get more idea about it when we go through SOAP and REST. When we get a request and when we need to reply, in that case we have an activity which will be used to reply to the request. Like we have a reply activity.
Oh, okay, fine.
This you will get in detail when we go through the SOAP and the REST services.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll just come back to this PPT again. So next is properties. I think The terminology properties is new compared to Fido-Tex. In Fido-Tex, we used to call global variables. Here we call it as properties, and we have 3 levels of properties. The intention is same. We need to define configuration, but we have 3 levels of properties here: process properties, module properties, and application properties. So I will just show you how do we create a module property and what are the difference between these 3. So under module descriptors, we have module properties, and here you can see we have defined variables. You can create a new group or you can add a new property inside this. And we call these as module properties. So when we say module properties, these properties are specific to this Tibco training POC module. And then the biggest difference what we have in 6.x from 5.x is, I think if you remember, we can use those, whatever we add it in the global variables, we used to see them in the input tab here on the left side, and we can directly use it. But we don't have that in 6.x. If we need to use any module property in any process, then just click on that process. We need to go to process property and add that. So I'll just take an example. I'll just create a string test, and here I have 2 options where we can select either a module property or a literal value. Like I can directly, if I select literal value, I can just provide a value here and I can use it in the process. But if we want to have that configurable at the module level, then we'll take it as a module property and we have to select that property. Say I'm just selecting this, and once we add this, we can see that here. See, now we can use this property in the input in the input tab of all the activities. And we can directly click on here also. It will take us to the process properties. So there is an option, if you click here, it will directly take us to the process properties. So I just covered process property and module properties. So process properties is specific to that process, and you can either put a literal value, or that means you can hard code something at the process level, or you can take it from module property. And module properties are specific to this module, like Tibco training POC. And what we have in application properties is, so application, we include the module what we use. Here we have only one module, but we can have multiple modules, like only one application module, but we can have multiple shared modules. So I think we have a separate exercise when we'll use a shared module. And when we have one more shared module, and if we go to the properties, here we see only the properties which are specific to the module Tibco training POC. But if we have shared modules, then we'll have one more and one more thing being added, and we'll see the list of the properties for that shared module also. So application properties will have all the module properties plus shared module properties, but module will have its specific properties. And whenever we deploy this into admin or TIA, you will be able to change all the application properties. So whatever you have defined at the module level, this can be overwritten at the application level from TIA or using an automatic deployment. And the properties what we defined in the shared module, those can be used only in those shared modules and cannot be used in this application module. So that's what is being covered here. If you see, we have application at the highest level, and under that we have module. And if you want to use any properties in an activity in a process, then you have to define it as at the process level. So we have like the visibility and the information about all three types of properties. Like process will be visible only within the visibility will be only till that process. The module will be at the module level, and the application will be like it will display all the module properties in the application, including from the shared module.
Kirti, sorry to interrupt, but I have a query here.
Yep.
Normally in 5.x, right, we make global variables, and during deployment we can change the values and that would not need like a fresh deploy. That we just need to do a redeploy, and the shared variable, the global variable new value will be reflecting. So in this case, which value we can't change the module value, right?
No, that's what application will include all module properties. So if you see now, if you see my screen now, so this will be the profile, and you can create multiple profiles each for your each environment. So I have this profile for dev, I can have it for sit. But to answer your question, we can change these properties from like how do you do in 5.x from admin. Similarly, we can do it for 6.x from TIA, because we will be able to edit the application properties at the deployment level, and these application properties will include all the module properties of the application plus the module properties of the shared modules.
Okay.
Did I answer you?
Yeah. Probably if with an example, I'll be able to understand better. For example, in a timer, we have the starter timing and we have interval timings, right? So for testing purpose, we generally keep it for 5 minutes, and then once we deploy it, we want to change it to a higher value, correct? If we untick run once, if you uncheck run once.
Yeah, I got. So you want.
So what I'm asking is, suppose as if now for execution purpose in dev itself, I deploy it with a time difference of say 5 minutes. Okay, and I have done my testing. Now I want to make a final deployment in dev itself. So this value which is in interval, we generally map it in GV, so that it's easy to change. But in this case, what should I map it to? Should I map it to a module variable, application variable, or that's what my question is.
Yeah. So, may I know your name?
Sorry, Priyanka.
Yeah, Priyanka. So, it's like you have, as I showed you, we have multiple profiles. So you can have a separate profile for your dev. I got your point. You have deployed, and if you want to change your time interval, so that's what I showed it over here. If you come to the application properties, so these all, I'll show you I'll add that what you just told me. So this time interval, I will create a module property for this. So now I just created a module property for interval, and I'm using it over here. Okay. So now when I come to application, at application level also that property would have been added. See, so whenever you deploy at runtime, only the application property you need to change at the application level. So as you can see here, we have a profile where I have a value, and whatever value you need, you can update it to deploy it. Say you can have a environment specific value, and you can configure that here. So all module properties will be there in the application properties, and you have to edit those application property when you're from your. Yeah.
But the vice versa is not true. That means if I mention an application property, it will not reflect in module. It will remain only till the application, correct?
Yeah, but Priyanka, the thing is, whatever module properties is being added will be there in application. We cannot add any new property here.
Right. Right.
Okay. So if you change anything, say if I change this value once I deploy it, if I change it to 10, your timer will this will be reflected for your timer activity.
Right.
The scope is at application level we can change everything, and your each and every activity will have that value.
Okay.
So Priyanka, the simple funda is like only you can create application properties only to the module properties which are already available. So you cannot create a separate application property and you can bring it to the module level.
Yes. Yes. I understood. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, and we have sub processes. Does anyone have any questions on properties, or else I'll move to the sub processes? Okay, so sub processes, I just given a like it's similar to what we have it in Fire.x. We have a main process which we call it as a parent process. Mostly it will be a start. It will start with a starter activity and sub processes. So in Fire.x we can create only a direct sub process where you configure your schema in the start activity, and which will be sent from your main process, which calls your sub process. Here we have one more type which is known as service sub process. So this with 6.x it's moving closely to SOA based, where everything will be exposed as a service. So in case of service sub process, there will be a service. The main process will call the sub process via a service. So there will be a visitor, and will call that operation, and the sub process will execute and respond us back. Yeah. So and when we are calling from a main process to a sub process using service, we don't need a transport. And if we need to expose that to the external systems, we need to add transport and the binding, either the SOAP or the rest. So I'll just show it over here. So when we click on create business work sub process, we have an option direct or service. So if we select on direct, this is similar to what we have in Fire.x, and this is what we are using here. We have start activity, a JDBC update, log, and that activity. So start activity, you can have the schema being configured, and that will be reflected here, and you will map those fields here. So this is completely similar to what we have in Fire.x. And one thing, this sub process, a direct sub process call, this was not present till 6.2.2, and we are using 6.2.2, so we don't have this option by now. Any sub process call we are making through Visual, but the good thing is they have added this feature again back in the newer version, and what I'm sharing is with 6.3.2, so I can see this as an option.
Kirti, can you please come again on this one?
Sorry?
Can you please come again on this new option?
Yeah. So it's a new option for 6.x, but this is an existing thing what we have in Fire.x also. So this is similar to what we have it in sub-process in Fire.x. And like how do we call a sub-process is just using a call process activity and sending the fields, which will be configured in the start activity in the output editor of the start activity, and whatever you reply here in the end activity will come here. So as we are not expecting any replies, so we don't have anything here. So this what I said was this is a new feature in 6.3.2, and or it started with 6.3.1, because when we started with our implementation in our project with 6.x, we started with 6.2.0 and we are currently on 6.2.2. In 6.2.2, we don't have this direct sub-process call option. So for us, if we need to call any sub-process, we are calling it through a service. I'll show that feature also. How can we call through a service? this in the next step, but this is similar to what we have it in 5.x. And it's a new feature for 6.x version, but we had it in 5.x. Next, I will go through what we have new in 6.x, which was not present in 5.x. Okay, I'll just show you how do we create a sub-process using service. So this is a new feature which was not present in 5.x. Just need to click on new, create a business work sub-process. Here we have an option, direct or service. We need to select service. And here again we have an option, whether we want it as default or custom. Custom means if we already have a visitor, we can use that. And in the next step, I think we need to configure that visitor here. Need to browse that visitor, but we don't have any visitor here, so I'll just show you a default one. So when you select default, it will automatically create a visitor.
What's that inline and the other option?
Yeah. So we have two things. I'll just show it over here. This I will cover in the next thing. I think I have the last thing on the inline and the non-inline thing. Is it fair?
Okay. Yep, sure.
So if you see, by default we have created a sub-process and a visitor is being added in the subscripted. So if you see, this is the sub-process one visitor, which has an operation request, response, and a fault. So this is by default being created with no parameters being defined. It just has a single string field as input. Operation response has just one field as output. But if you see here, so we need to select these we call it as service, and here what we call is called reference. So the difference is I will configure this reference in the other process. Service means we are exposing something, so that will you will see that at the left side. And if we need to invoke, say, an external service, then we'll configure that over here. If either I need to invoke an external web service with binding, or if I need to invoke an external service without binding internal to Tibco, then also we'll configure that over here. I'll show that in the main process, how can we call this a process. But if you see this, there is an operation being created, and the one more advantage with this is you can have multiple operations. So only one process, you can do multiple operations. Like, say, if you're planning, with a simple example, if you're planning to have an addition, a subprocess for an addition, a subprocess for, say, subtraction, and subprocess for multiplication, instead of creating three subprocesses, what we used to do in 5.x, we can create three operations, and we can implement all three over here. We'll find more about this service calling subprocesses in the coming exercises, where we'll be using SOAP and REST a lot. So here we are calling a subprocess. When I told you, when we need to call, say, other service or an external service or an internal service, we need to configure this over here. So we need to click on that eye icon in purple, and this is the one which we have created now, service. So if I click on this, you see that the operation what we have added in the visitor, we can see it over here, and you can clearly see how does a subprocess call will look like if we are doing a direct subprocess call or a service subprocess call. So you just need to click on this, and you need to set which subprocess we want to use. So this is a new subprocess. and the corresponding service. And so this is the process, sub-process 1, which has the implementation of this service. So this is the one which has the implementation. This is the implementation process, and we are invoking that from here. So we just need to click here, drag and drop. You see how it looks. It looks like similar to a sub-process, but that is the difference what we have. If you have a direct sub-process call, the call process activity will be like this, and if we have a service-based sub-process call, the activity will look like this. And you can see that I haven't configured anything. We can configure any value, say an input, and you'll get that output, and you can use that output over here. So it happens sometimes. If you see, I'm not able to see. I should be able to see an output field. So if you don't see it, either we can do one thing. Yeah. So we can delete this and add it back. So if I click here, it asks me to implement an operation. So we get these activities added, and now we can see that an out field is coming. So sometimes there will be some reference broken, so we won't be able to see that field. We can just delete it and drag it and back here and click on implement operation. So you will be able to see the field. So this is how we use a sub-process call using a service. And coming back to inline and non-inline, I think someone raised it. So inline means it's like what we had for spawn and not spawned in FireOTEX. So if we select inline, it's like not spawned. Like your main process and your sub-process will be running on the same engine, and like whenever you are expecting something, some response back from your sub-process, then you should use it as inline. Yeah, process and the main process will run on the same engine and on the same parent ID. And if you select it as non-inline, then it will be like a spawn process. Mostly if we have a third-party library when we are logging and we don't need any reply back from our shared module, then we will make it as non-inline because we don't need any response back from the logging process. But in this case, it should be inline because we'll expect some response back to our main process. Does that answer your question?
Exactly. I got that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
So I think implementation-wise, this is how we do. But like running, configuring it, we'll show it to you in the next exercise. How can we call a sub-process using a service? But this is how we do. I won't run it now. I will just configure this DAT sub-process call. But this is how you just need to configure and pass the parameter, and you'll get the response. Yeah, and I told you, right? So for the starter process, this will be yellowish orange. Sub-process, a direct sub-process, this will be in green. And when there is a service sub-process, you will see that in blue. Blue means it's just exposed to our service and it doesn't need any binding. And if you want it to be exposed to external systems also, you need to add a component and make it as a parent process so that it can expect requests from the external systems also. You will find all these things when we go through SOAP and the rest things. Yeah, and one more thing, like you see this message sender as the main process, right? You can make it as a sub process. So everything depends on what you have added in components. So you see I've added message receiver and message sender. If I just remove message sender from components, see, this has turned to blue. So this will act as a sub process now. but we won't, like as it has a timer activity, it will never be triggered when our BW application starts. So we would need to add that as a main process. So I will remove this visual and the sub-process for service, and we'll run an end-to-end application with what we have. So any questions till now? I'll just run this application now. Okay, let me show how do we run this. I already have a database connection set up. I'll just change the employee ID, so that's the primary key. And whenever you need to run, you have again two options. This is moreover similar to what we have in Java. So you have a debug option and run option. Whenever you're testing something, better to run it at the debug mode so that you can see where it goes wrong and you can see the entire flow of the application. And whenever you create this, what we run is this application and not this module. So you make sure that you have your module being added here. This will be automatically added, but it's better to verify it once before you start your application. And when you click on this, you have an option to click on debug config. So see, we have one application and that application is being listed. If we have in this workspace, if you have 5 applications and if you want to run one specific application, you can select that. And one more thing, see, if you're running multiple studios, like if you want to run 2 applications parallelly, so this is the engine debug port, which is 9090 by default. If you are running one more application in a separate workspace, then you need to change this because it will be already in use. And in arguments tab also you have a port, which is the HTTP port, by default 8090. But if you need to run 2 applications in 2 separate workspaces, then you need to change these 2 port numbers. So I have added that debug configuration and I will run this now. We can see that in the console. So you'll get a message here saying that started BW application. That means it's started. It's not yet started. Your engine is started successfully. The BW engine started successfully. Yeah, that means it started now. So if you see, started BW application, this means you are good to go. So we had a timer, so it completed also. But whenever you say you want to hit it from SOAP or something, when you see this message that it's started BW application, then you can go ahead and trigger a request. So I'll show you how can we navigate through this. So on the left top, you will see all these processes what were being executed. Our first process was JMS and message sender with all these activities. When I click on this, you can see the entire flow, which was successful, and I can click on each activity, the timer, and on the right side there is job data. So you can see all the variables here. Then we have read file, where you are reading the file name, JMS. So you can see both input, output, fault, and like all means it will give you everything. So you can see what is the message being pushed. This is the data. and this is the logger. So if you see, this message is being pushed in the console because we are writing it to a log. Then you can go through, like, now if you select on this panel will reflect the next process, what was executed. It received the message, it passed, and it called a sub process, and in sub process we inserted the data. This is the sub process which updated the data into the JDBC. Like, we have that record being updated in SQL. So, and at the end, after this also we have a log which says that we have updated the data. So this is what is being printed on the console. Employee data successfully inserted. So, any questions on this?
Hi, there's one question. In the previous 5. version, we could send multiple requests, right? So here, if I want to send a second request, can I do that, or do I need to again run it?
If you want, like, you used to send and add an input XML message in your start activity input and send a request, right?
No. What I'm telling you is there we had that one green color icon used to come, right, where we can fire one more request after we have started the Tibco in 5.x version. So like multiple, suppose like again I want to insert the data now, like keeping my old request also.
Okay, I got your point. No, we can't do it in 6.x. And the one thing is, I think moreover this is a process starter which we have as a timer. So I've selected it as run once, so it won't. But the thing what you are saying is that is when you have a start activity, you don't have it a process starter. In 5.x also, if I remember, you cannot do that for a process starter. Say if you have a stub kind of thing, a process which has a and you can, once a job is being completed, you can trigger one more by just selecting and rerunning it. That's what we used to do in 5.x. But I think that's not, it's not even possible in 5.x for a process starter. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you can trigger multiple requests from a normal process which doesn't have a process starter, and I think that also can be done using a process launcher here. We'll go through the process launcher in detail in the coming exercises because I need to look into this. We don't have this option in 6.2.2 and it's newly added in 6.3. So I'll just go through this, and in the coming exercise I will show you how can you trigger, like for you have a sub process where you can configure the input and trigger this.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other question? If not, then I am done with from my side. I think we have an exercise at the end of the lab book. You guys can try this, and if you guys can get any issue, like in the rest of the 45 minutes, you guys can start with this if you have set up already, or else in the start of the lab book you have all the instructions for the setup. From where do you need to download softwares, what all softwares you need to download, and you can start with this. Any issues if you face with respect to this exercise, you can anytime contact me.
Hello, this is Rita here. Actually, we tried to download the installables from the site mentioned in this last email.
Okay.
Okay, but those are the 64-bit installers.
And you have a 32-bit system.
Yeah.
Don't you have the 32-bit installable at that location?
No,
Yes.
we tried to search it, but we couldn't find it.
I downloaded the 32 version.
Okay, can you just forward me? Is this Priyanka?
Yeah, that's right.
Priyanka, can you just forward me the link?
Yeah, sure.
Link or different thing you have tried?
I think it's the tab site.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, just forward me, no?
Can you please tell me your email ID? I'll forward it to you.
Sorry?
Email ID, please.
Yeah, it's hetal.a.shah@capgemini.com.
Okay, I'll forward it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Priyanka.
Thank you.
So you guys can try this exercise or what is being mentioned here, and do let me know if you face any issues. Thanks all for your time. I'm closing this call.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.